world to us. Tell us, which corner of the globe are you watching from? We love knowing our global reach. Now, let's dive into today's story. Chapter 1. Hollow Victories. The champagne bottles popped one after another, filling the air with celebratory sounds that Vince Bryant found increasingly hollow. Their spacious suburban home was packed with his wife's colleagues, friends, and, to his quiet dismay, his own parents, who had driven 3 hours to attend Haley's surprise promotion party, a party she had thrown for herself. Vince leaned against the kitchen counter, nursing a whiskey he'd poured himself when nobody was watching. At 37, he still maintained the physique of his college rugby days, though his once vibrant brown eyes had dulled over the years of subtle degradation. His hands, calloused from years of work that went unnoticed, tightened around his glass. "Everyone, can I have your attention?" Richard Bryant, Vince's father, tapped his glass with a dessert fork. The crowd hushed, turning toward the distinguished, silver-haired man whose bearing commanded respect. "Nancy and I would like to propose a toast to our wonderful daughter-in-law." Vince's mother, Nancy, beamed beside her husband. "To our wonderful daughter-in-law, the real breadwinner." The room erupted in cheers and laughter. Haley, resplendent in her designer dress that cost more than Vince's monthly contribution to their mortgage, smiled triumphantly. Her auburn hair was styled in an elegant updo that accentuated her sharp features and calculating green eyes. Vince stood in silence, watching the scene unfold like a spectator at his own execution. The words stung deeper than anyone knew. His parents had never approved of his choice to leave corporate law to start his own private investigation firm. They considered it throwing away his Stanford education, especially when the business struggled in its early years. What they didn't know, what no one in this room knew, was that his business had finally turned a corner, silently growing into something formidable. Later, as the party wound down, Haley approached him with a small plate. "Your portion, loser," she snapped, handing him a pathetically small slice of cake. When she walked away to mingle with the remaining guests, Vince slipped the plate onto the counter untouched. He quietly made his way to his home office, locked the door behind him, and opened his laptop. The background on his personal devices showed Haley and him on their honeymoon in Bali 7 years earlier. Her smile had been genuine then, before he became a disappointment in her eyes. But the desktop image on his work laptop was different, a simple black background with a chessboard, a game in progress. He opened a program that few would recognize and typed in his credentials. The screen displayed a series of GPS coordinates, timestamps, and audio files. Vince had suspected for months, but hadn't wanted to confirm what he already knew in his gut. He'd installed the tracking software on Haley's phone 3 weeks ago, initially telling himself it was professional curiosity, then admitting it was suspicion, and finally acknowledging it was certainty-seeking proof. The locations told a clear story. Regular visits to the Willow Creek Hotel during lunch breaks, always in the same room. Always when the hotel record showed that room booked to Maxwell Grant, her boss. Vince took another sip of his whiskey, feeling a strange calm settle over him. Tomorrow would be the day he'd been planning for. The beginning of something even Haley couldn't imagine. Downstairs, laughter continued. Vince could hear Maxwell's distinctive baritone among the voices. The man who had hired Haley as his assistant 5 years ago, promoted her twice, and was now sleeping with her. The man who had attended their anniversary dinner last month, raising a toast to the perfect couple. Vince closed his laptop and leaned back in his chair. He wasn't just a private investigator. Before Stanford Law, before meeting Haley, he'd spent 4 years in Army intelligence. Skills he'd kept sharp but hidden, along with the networks he maintained. Skills that had built his business into something that now specialized in complex corporate cases rather than the divorce work he'd taken to pay the bills in the early days. He closed his eyes and listened to the sounds of the party below, memorizing voices, noting who laughed at what. Information was power, and Vince Bryant had been gathering information for a very long time. Chapter 2. Digital Footprints. The morning after the party, Vince woke before sunrise. Haley slept soundly beside him, her breathing calm and regular, oblivious to the storm brewing within her husband. He slipped out of bed and made his way to the guest bathroom, not wanting to disturb her. Not out of courtesy, but because today required precision. In his home office, Vince activated the sophisticated equipment he'd installed behind a false panel in his bookcase. Years of corporate investigation work had taught him the value of proper surveillance. The system had captured and recorded every phone call made within the house, including the one Haley had made to Maxwell Grant at 2:17 a.m. from the powder room downstairs, thinking Vince was asleep. "I can't keep doing this, Max. He suspects nothing, but I hate the way he looks at me, like some wounded animal. It's pathetic. Just a few more weeks, baby. Once the merger goes through, I'll be named COO. Then we'll have everything we need. You promise? Because I don't think I can stand another day of his mediocrity." "I promise. After today's meeting, everything changes. Your husband will become irrelevant." Vince listened to the recording twice, his expression unchanging. He'd expected something like this, but hearing the disdain in Haley's voice still cut deep. He checked his watch. 7:15 a.m. Maxwell's meeting with the board was scheduled for 9 a.m. The meeting where Maxwell would present his proposal for the Helios merger, a deal that would make his career and cement his claim to the COO position. What Maxwell didn't know was that Vince's firm had recently been hired by a competitor to investigate potential improprieties in that very merger. A fact that Haley was also unaware of, as she had long since stopped asking about his work, dismissing it as unsuccessful and beneath her interest. At 7:30 a.m., Haley's alarm went off. Vince heard her stirring upstairs. He quickly closed the surveillance system and opened a different file on his computer. Photographs taken over the past 3 months showing Maxwell and Haley entering the Willow Creek Hotel on 13 separate occasions. He transferred these to an encrypted drive and slipped it into his pocket. "You're up early," Haley said from the doorway, her voice flat. She was already dressed in her power suit, hair perfectly arranged. "Just catching up on some work," Vince replied, keeping his tone neutral. "Right? Your work?" She made air quotes with her fingers. "I need to go in early. Maxwell is presenting to the board today." She couldn't hide the gleam of excitement in her eyes. "Don't wait up. We'll probably celebrate afterward." "I'm sure you will," Vince said, smiling for the first time that morning. "Good luck to both of you." Haley paused, perhaps catching something in his tone, but then dismissed it with a shrug. "There's leftover cake in the fridge if you want it. Try not to make a mess of the house while I'm gone." After she left, Vince made a series of phone calls. The first was to Thomas Anderson, his former Army intelligence colleague who now worked in digital security. "It's time," Vince said simply. "You're sure about this?" Thomas asked, his voice grave. "I'm sure. Execute at exactly 8:45. His next call was to Sophia Reeves, a junior partner at Haley's firm whom he'd met during a corporate event last year. Sophia had confided in him about the toxic culture Maxwell had created, the favoritism, the harassment, the fear. She had provided valuable information, not knowing exactly how Vince would use it. "The file will be in your inbox in 20 minutes, Vince told her. "You know what to do." "The board members will all have it before the meeting starts," Sophia confirmed. "But what about your wife? She's still Maxwell's right hand." "Let me worry about Haley," Vince replied, his voice suddenly cold. "She's made her choices." At precisely 8:30 a.m., Vince sent one final email to the SEC Enforcement Division, with whom he had cultivated a relationship over years of providing them with information on various cases. The email contained evidence of Maxwell Grant's manipulation of financial projections for the Helios merger, information that Vince had been meticulously gathering for months. Then he sat back and waited for the first domino to fall. Chapter 3: The Unraveling. At 9:17 a.m., Vince's phone lit up with a text from Sophia. "It's happening. Board meeting in chaos. SEC just arrived." At 9:43 a.m., the first news alert appeared on his computer screen. "Breaking. Pinnacle Corp executives under investigation for fraud. Trading halted." At 10:21 a.m., his phone began vibrating incessantly with incoming calls and messages from Haley. He let them all go to voicemail, watching as the notification count climbed. 17, 36, 58, 87. By noon, The count had reached 200 messages, ranging from confused to panicked to furious. Vince listened to only the first one. Vince, something's happened. The SEC is here. Maxwell's been taken in for questioning. They have evidence. They say I might be implicated. Call me back immediately. Instead of calling her back, Vince drove to the office of Alfred Winters, a senior partner at Blackwood and Hart, one of the most prestigious law firms in the city. Alfred was an old classmate from Stanford who owed Vince a significant favor. "You've stirred up quite a hornet's nest," Alfred remarked, gesturing for Vince to take a seat. "The SEC is all over Pinnacle. The evidence you provided is comprehensive. What's the damage?" Vince asked. "Maxwell Grant is finished. The board has already suspended him pending investigation. The merger is dead. As for your wife," Alfred paused, studying Vince's impassive face. "She's claiming ignorance, but the evidence suggests she was involved in preparing the fraudulent projections. At minimum, her career at Pinnacle is over. Criminal charges are possible." Vince nodded slowly. "And my name?" "Nowhere to be found," Alfred confirmed. "Your firm is clean. The SEC views you as a whistleblower, not a participant." As Vince stood to leave, Alfred called after him. "Vince, what you've done here, it's perfectly legal, but what?" Vince turned, his expression hardening. "It's ruthless. I didn't think you had it in you." Vince smiled thinly. "There's a lot people don't know about me, Alfred, my wife included." That evening, Vince sat in his darkened home office, listening to the sound of Haley's car pulling into the driveway. He heard her fumbling with her keys, and the front door slamming open. Her footsteps were unsteady as she stormed through the house. "Vince, where are you?" Her voice was raw, desperate. He remained silent, watching her through the security cameras he'd installed throughout the house. She looked disheveled, her perfect composure shattered. "I know you're here. Your car is outside." She was in the kitchen now, yanking open cabinets, slamming them shut. She grabbed a bottle of vodka and drank directly from it. Finally, Vince pressed the intercom button. "I'm in my office, Haley." She froze at the sound of his voice, then rushed toward his office, only to find the door locked. "Open this door right now." She pounded on it with her fists. "I'd rather not," Vince replied calmly. "You seem upset." "Upset? My life is ruined. The SEC is investigating me. Maxwell has been arrested. The board thinks I was part of it all." Her voice broke. "I need you to help me, Vince. You're a lawyer. You must know people who can fix this. Like Maxwell was going to fix things for you." There was a sudden silence from the other side of the door. Then, very quietly, "What did you say?" "You heard me, Haley. Just a few more weeks, baby. Once the merger goes through, I'll be named COO. Then we'll have everything we need." That's what he promised you last night, right? When you called him at 2:17 a.m. from our powder room. The pounding on the door resumed, more frantic now. "You bastard. You've been spying on me? What did you do? What did you do?" Vince's voice remained calm. "I did what I do best, Haley. I investigated. I gathered evidence. I presented it to the appropriate authorities. You destroyed me because I hurt your feelings? Because of some stupid affair?" Her voice was incredulous. "No, Haley. I destroyed you because you deserved it. The affair was just a symptom of who you really are. I've known for years the contempt, the mockery, the betrayal. Last night was simply the final confirmation." "So what happens now?" she asked, her voice suddenly small. Now you leave. Your things have been packed. They're in the garage. The divorce papers are on top of the suitcases. My lawyer will contact you tomorrow. You can't do this. This is my house, too." Vince's laugh was cold. "Actually, it's not. Check the deed. This house is owned by a trust that I established before we were married. You have no claim to it. Just like you have no claim to our joint accounts, which I emptied this morning. Legally, I might add, as they were established with my funds." "You've been planning this," she whispered, the realization dawning on her. "For longer than you know," Vince confirmed. "The only mistake I made was loving you in the first place." There was a long silence, then the sound of Haley sliding down against the door, her breath coming in ragged sobs. "I'll ruin you for this," she threatened, but her voice lacked conviction. "You could try," Vince replied, "but remember who I am and what I do. Remember that I just dismantled a billion-dollar merger and brought down a C-suite executive in a single morning. Remember that I did it without anyone suspecting my involvement until it was too late." He paused, then added quietly, "And remember that I'm just getting started." Chapter 4. Ghosts of the Past. 3 months after Haley's departure, Vince sat in the back booth of O'Malley's Bar, a dimly lit establishment that catered to a clientele who valued discretion. Across from him sat Perry Novak, a man whose weathered face and vigilant eyes spoke of a past similar to Vince's own. "Your ex-wife has been busy," Perry said, sliding a manila folder across the table. "She's hired a private investigator of her own." Vince nodded, unsurprised. "Let me guess. She's trying to prove I set her up. Among other things, she's desperate, reaching out to anyone who might help her case." Vince opened the folder, skimming the contents. Surveillance photos of him, records of his movements, interviews with former clients. Amateur work, but persistent. "And Maxwell?" Vince asked, closing the folder. "Out on bail, but facing serious charges. He's cooperating with the SEC, trying to minimize the damage. Word is he's planning to implicate your ex-wife as the mastermind." Perry took a sip of his whiskey. "He's thrown her under the bus completely." "Some love affair," Vince remarked dryly. Perry leaned forward, lowering his voice. "There's something else. Someone's been asking questions about your military service, specifically about Operation Blackbriar." Vince's expression hardened. Operation Blackbriar was classified, a counterintelligence mission that had gone south in ways that never made the official reports. Only 5 people had survived it. 3 of them were still in the service. One was Vince, and the 5th, Russell Stone, Vince said quietly. Perry nodded. "He's back in town. Reached out to Haley 2 weeks ago." Russell Stone had been Vince's commanding officer during his Army intelligence days, a man whose moral flexibility had eventually led to his dishonorable discharge. A man who had nearly gotten Vince killed in Kazakhstan during the operation that ended both their military careers. "He's looking for payback," Vince concluded. "Or money. Probably both. Either way, he's dangerous. And he knows things about you that could complicate your situation." Vince pulled out his phone, scrolling to a contact he hadn't used in years. "Thomas needs to know about this. Stone might approach him too." Thomas Anderson had been the 3rd survivor of Blackbriar who had left the service. Now working in private security, he'd been Vince's ally in the initial stages of his plan against Haley and Maxwell. "Already warned him," Perry confirmed. "He's taking precautions." Vince stared into his glass, calculating. The appearance of Russell Stone changed things. Stone knew about Vince's specialized training, about the covert operations that had honed his skills in psychological warfare and strategic deception. Knowledge that could potentially help Haley prove that Vince had orchestrated her downfall with military precision. "I need to accelerate the timeline," Vince decided. "How quickly can you get me the materials we discussed?" 3 days. "What are you sure about this, Vince?" "What you're planning, it's crossing a line." Vince's smile didn't reach his eyes. "They crossed the line first, Perry. I'm just acknowledging the new boundaries." Later that night, Vince returned to his home office, where the chess game on his computer had advanced several moves. He opened his secure server and reviewed the information he'd been accumulating, Maxwell's offshore accounts, the trail of sexual harassment complaints that had been quietly settled, the evidence of insider trading that went beyond the Helios merger. He also reviewed the file on Russell Stone, updating it with Perry's intelligence. Stone was a wild card, unpredictable and vengeful. But he was also greedy and fundamentally self-serving, traits that could be exploited. Vince opened a new document and began typing, a comprehensive plan for the next phase. This wasn't just about Haley anymore. It was about ensuring that everyone who had betrayed him, everyone who had underestimated him, would understand the magnitude of their mistake. As dawn broke, Vince finally closed his laptop and moved to the window, watching as the neighborhood came to life. Across the street, a family was loading suitcases into their car. A vacation, perhaps, or a weekend trip to visit relatives. Normal people with normal lives. Vince had left normal behind the moment he discovered Haley's betrayal. Or perhaps long before that, in the mountains of Kazakhstan, when he'd learned that trust was a luxury he couldn't afford. His phone vibrated with an incoming text from Thomas. Stone made contact, offering partnership against you. I've agreed to meet. We'll keep you posted. Vince typed a single word in response. Good. The game was evolving, pieces moving across the board. And Vince had always been very good at chess. Chapter 5. Pawns and Knights. I want to be absolutely clear, Thomas Anderson said, his voice low as he sat across from Russell Stone in the corner booth of a downtown diner. I'm only here because I owe you for Blackbriar. Stone smiled, the expression failing to soften his granite features. At 53, he retained the hard physique and calculating eyes that had made him both respected and feared in military intelligence circles. And yet you've been helping Bryant, Stone observed, cutting into his steak. Interesting choice of loyalty. Thomas maintained his poker face. Business, not loyalty. Vince pays well for digital security consulting. And did this consulting include helping him destroy his wife's career? Thomas shrugged. I secured his communications. What he did with that security isn't my concern. Stone leaned forward. Bryant's ex-wife is offering a substantial finder's fee for information that proves he set her up. The kind of money that would let you upgrade that security outfit of yours into something serious. And you're offering me a cut if I help you? 30%. Plus a guarantee that when this blows back on Bryant, and it will, you'll be protected? Thomas appeared to consider this. What exactly do you need from me? Access to Bryant's systems. Evidence that he planted information or manipulated data to frame his wife and Grant. That's a tall order. Vince is careful. Stone's smile widened. Everyone makes mistakes. Even Bryant. Later that evening, Thomas met Vince in an underground parking garage, their conversation masked by the noise of a nearby exhaust fan. Stone took the bait, Thomas confirmed. He believes I'm considering his offer. Vince nodded. And Haley? How much is she offering? $500,000 for actionable evidence against you. She's liquidated her investment portfolio to fund this vendetta. Desperate, Vince remarked. And getting sloppy. She's also drinking heavily. Missed her last court appearance, which didn't help her case with the SEC. Vince absorbed this information without visible reaction. Haley's downward spiral wasn't part of his plan, merely a predictable outcome of pressure applied to someone whose self-image was built entirely on external validation. What about Maxwell? Vince asked. Thomas handed him a flash drive. His legal team is in disarray. 3 different law firms have dropped him after initial consultations. Nobody wants to touch his case with the evidence the SEC has. And the offshore accounts. Frozen, as of yesterday. The Cayman Islands Financial Authority is cooperating with the investigation. He's effectively broke unless he can access the emergency cash reserve you mentioned. Vince pocketed the flash drive. He'll make a move for those within the week. Have our people in place. Thomas hesitated. Vince, are you sure about bringing Stone into this? The man is unpredictable at best. He could decide that selling you out directly is more profitable than working with either of us. I'm counting on his greed, not his loyalty, Vince assured him. Stone will play his part without realizing it, just like Haley did, just like Maxwell is doing now. And me? Thomas asked quietly. What part am I playing? Vince clasped his old colleague's shoulder. You're the only one I trust, Thomas. The only one who knows the full scope of what I'm doing. That's not an answer. No, Vince agreed. It's not. The next morning, Vince received confirmation that Maxwell Grant had made a desperate attempt to access his emergency funds. $2.3 million in cash stored in a private vault at Geneva Secure Holdings, a high-end storage facility that catered to the ultra-wealthy. What Maxwell didn't know was that Vince had been monitoring his communications through backdoor access Thomas had installed months earlier. The moment Maxwell had made arrangements to visit the facility, Vince's team had been alerted. By the time Maxwell arrived at Geneva Secure Holdings, his biometric access had been quietly revoked. The contents of his vault had been legally transferred to a trust controlled by Vince's Shell Corporation, a transfer made possible by documents Maxwell himself had signed years earlier during a drunken celebration, believing them to be standard rental agreements. Simultaneously, Sophia Reeves, still working at Pinnacle Corp., executed the next phase of Vince's plan. As acting head of Maxwell's former department, She began a comprehensive audit that revealed patterns of financial misconduct stretching back 5 years. Patterns that implicated not just Maxwell, but Haley as well. By midday, Vince received word that Maxwell had been denied access to his vault, had suffered what appeared to be a panic attack in the facility's lobby, and was now being treated at St. Mary's Hospital. The attending physician, an old university friend of Vince's who owed him a favor, would ensure that Maxwell was held for a 72-hour psychiatric evaluation. 3 days, just enough time for the final pieces to fall into place. That evening, Vince met with Alfred Winters again, this time at the lawyer's opulent home in the hills overlooking the city. "Your wife's legal position is deteriorating rapidly," Alfred informed him, pouring 2 glasses of 30-year-old scotch. "The SEC has evidence that she knowingly prepared fraudulent documents for the Helios merger. Will she face criminal charges?" Vince asked, accepting the drink. "Almost certainly. The U.S. Attorney's Office is preparing an indictment. Multiple counts of securities fraud, wire fraud, and conspiracy. And Maxwell. Worse, the psychiatric hold isn't helping his credibility. His own attorney is pushing for a competency evaluation, hoping for an insanity defense." Alfred studied Vince over the rim of his glass. The timing of his breakdown is convenient. Vince merely sipped his scotch, saying nothing. "There's something else," Alfred continued. "A man came to my office today, asking questions about you. Former military, by his bearing. Called himself Russell Stone. What did he want? Information about your divorce proceedings. Details about any evidence you might have provided regarding your wife's involvement in the Pinnacle fraud. And what did you tell him? Nothing substantive. Attorney-client privilege." Alfred set down his glass. But he made an offer. A substantial one. For what exactly? For copies of any recordings or documents you might have showing your foreknowledge of the Pinnacle situation. He seems convinced you orchestrated the whole thing. Vince smiled faintly. "And did you take his offer?" "I told him I'd consider it." Alfred leaned forward, his expression serious. "Vince, this man is dangerous. The way he spoke about you, there's history there." "Bad history?" "Yes," Vince agreed. "There is. He wants to hurt you. Not just professionally." "I know." Vince finished his scotch and set the glass down carefully. "That's why he's perfect." Alfred frowned. "Perfect for what?" "For the final act," Vince replied. "The one where everyone gets exactly what they deserve." Chapter 6. The Architect's Blueprint. Russell Stone sat in his rented apartment, surrounded by documents, photographs, and digital files, the accumulated evidence of Vince Bryant's methodical destruction of Haley and Maxwell Grant. It was impressive work, Stone had to admit. The kind of intricate, patient operation he himself might have designed back in his military days. His phone rang, a secured line that only 3 people had the number for. "You've made progress?" Haley Bryant's voice was taut with anxiety, and what Stone suspected was the effects of too much vodka and too little sleep. "Considerable," Stone confirmed. "Your husband's digital security is good, but not impenetrable. I've uncovered evidence that he had advanced knowledge of the SEC investigation into Pinnacle." "That's not enough," Haley insisted. "I need proof that he engineered the whole thing. That he framed me and Maxwell." "Patience, Mrs. Bryant. These things take time. Time is something I don't have. The indictment could come any day now." Stone's voice hardened. "Then perhaps you should consider raising your offer. Quality intelligence isn't cheap, especially when it's tied to federal securities charges." There was a pause, then, "How much more?" "Double. 1 million, with half up front." "That's impossible. I've already liquidated everything I—" "Not everything," Stone interrupted. "You still have the Maldives property, purchased through a shell corporation that the authorities haven't yet traced to you or Grant, worth approximately $3.2 million. The silence that followed told Stone all he needed to know. Haley hadn't realized he'd discovered her secret escape plan. The luxury villa she and Maxwell had purchased as a bolt hole in case their affair and financial schemes were exposed. "How did you find out about that?" she finally asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "The same way I find out everything, Mrs. Bryant. By being better at this game than your husband thinks I am." Stone allowed himself a small smile. "Transfer the property to the entity, I'll text you." Once confirmed, I'll provide you with the evidence you need. And this will be enough to clear me? To prove Vince set us up? It will certainly create reasonable doubt, enough to negotiate a much more favorable plea deal at minimum. After ending the call, Stone turned back to his evidence board. Something wasn't adding up. Bryant's operation had been too smooth, too predictable in some ways. Almost as if his phone rang again, another secured line, this one connected to Thomas Anderson. "I'm in," Thomas said without preamble. Bryant's arrogance has finally worked against him. He left a backdoor in his home security system that I was able to exploit. "What did you find?" "A hidden partition on his main server. It contains recordings of every conversation he had planning this operation, including discussions about framing Haley and manufacturing evidence against Maxwell." Stone felt a surge of triumph. "Can you extract these files?" "Already done. But there's a complication." "What kind of complication?" "Bryant has a failsafe. If anyone accesses these files without proper authorization, a dead man switch activates. It would expose certain operations from our shared military past." Stone's blood ran cold. Operation Blackbriar, the Kazakhstan incident, the decisions that had led to his dishonorable discharge and nearly cost Bryant his life. "Can you disable the failsafe?" "Possibly, but I need physical access to his home system. The primary controls aren't connected to any external network." Stone considered his options. "How soon can you get me into his house?" He's scheduled to meet with his lawyer tomorrow at 2 p.m. The house will be empty for at least 2 hours. "Perfect. Text me the security details." Across town, in his home office, Vince Bryant disconnected from the secure server where he'd been monitoring both conversations in real time. The lines Thomas had given to both Haley and Stone had been compromised from the beginning. Every call, every text message feeding directly into Vince's surveillance system. He turned to Thomas, who sat across from him. "They've taken the bait. Both of them." Thomas nodded grimly. "Stone believes he's found your hidden files. Haley believes Stone can save her. And tomorrow, at 2 p.m., everything comes together," Vince finished. He opened his laptop and pulled up the architectural plans for his house, specifically the modifications he'd made to the home office where they now sat. The reinforced walls, the hidden panic room, the security measures that went far beyond what any normal homeowner would consider reasonable. "Are you absolutely sure about this, Vince?" Thomas asked quietly. "Once we set this in motion, there's no going back." Vince's expression was resolute. Stone and Haley made their choices. So did Maxwell. Now they'll live with the consequences. "And what about you? What happens afterward?" Vince gestured to a small duffel bag in the corner of the room. "I disappear. The identity is already established, the account's funded. Bryant ceases to exist. And everything you've built here, your business, your reputation, means nothing compared to justice." Vince closed the laptop. "Tomorrow, everything ends. And everything begins." The blueprint was complete. The architecture of revenge, designed with precision by a man who had been silently planning for years. A man whom everyone had underestimated, dismissed as weak, as a loser. They would learn their mistake. All of them. Chapter 7. The Trap Springs. At 1:58 p.m. the following day, Russell Stone approached Vince Bryant's house with the casual confidence of a professional who had breached more secure locations than a suburban residence. Thomas Anderson had provided detailed information about the security system, including temporarily disabled zones and blind spots in the camera coverage. What Thomas hadn't mentioned was that every one of these supposed vulnerabilities had been carefully engineered by Vince himself, designed specifically to guide an intruder along a predetermined path. Stone picked the side door lock with practiced ease and slipped inside, already mentally mapping the route to Vince's home office where the server was located. The house was silent, exactly as expected. Bryant would be meeting with his lawyer until at least 4 p.m. Stone moved efficiently through the kitchen, down the hallway, and toward the office door. He paused, listening for any unexpected sounds, then proceeded inside. The office appeared normal: desk, computer, bookshelves. The server Thomas had described was housed in a cabinet against the far wall. Stone crossed to it and began the process of accessing the hidden partition that supposedly contained Bryant's incriminating files. He was so focused on the task that he almost missed the soft click of the office door locking behind him. Almost, but not quite. Stone spun around, hand reaching instinctively for the weapon concealed beneath his jacket. "I wouldn't," said Vince Bryant, stepping out from a hidden door in the bookcase. "The room is secure. Bullets would ricochet. Messy for both of us." Stone's eyes narrowed, hand freezing midway to his weapon. "Bryant, you're supposed to be meeting your lawyer." "Alfred is very understanding about schedule changes," Vince replied calmly, "especially when they're part of a larger plan." "Anderson sold me out," Stone realized, mentally calculating potential escape routes. "Thomas was never yours to buy," Vince corrected him. "Unlike some, his loyalty can't be purchased." Stone's mind raced, reassessing the situation. "So this is a setup. What now? You turn me in for breaking and entering? Hardly seems worth the elaborate trap. Breaking and entering would be the least of your concerns, Russell." Vince moved to his desk and pressed a button underneath. A panel in the wall slid open, revealing a large monitor displaying multiple video feeds. One showed Haley Bryant pacing nervously in what appeared to be a hotel room. Another showed Maxwell Grant, now released from psychiatric hold, sitting in a car outside the same hotel. "I don't understand," Stone said, genuine confusion crossing his face. "You will." Vince pressed another button, and the largest screen switched to a video call interface. After 2 rings, Haley's face appeared. "Stone, did you get it? The evidence." She looked haggard, her once perfect appearance now marked by dark circles under her eyes and an unhealthy pallor. "Hello, Haley," Vince said, moving into the camera's view. Haley's expression transformed from hope to horror. "Vince? What is this? Where's Stone?" "He's here with me. Unfortunately, he won't be providing you with any evidence today. Or ever." Stone watched the exchange, his tactical brain already forming new strategies. "She's not the target, Bryant. I am. Whatever grudge you're holding from Blackbriar." "This was never about Blackbriar," Vince cut him off. "That's what you failed to understand, Russell. You were never the primary target. Just a convenient tool." "Tool for what?" Stone demanded. Instead of answering, Vince addressed Haley again. "Is Maxwell with you yet?" The shock on Haley's face confirmed what Vince already knew. "How did you know about your little rendezvous?" "The same way I knew about every meeting you had at the Willow Creek Hotel. The same way I knew about the villa in the Maldives. The same way I've known about everything, Haley." Vince's voice remained eerily calm. "Tell Maxwell to come up to the room. It's time we all had a conversation." "Vince, please." Haley's composure cracked. "Whatever you think you know." 2 minutes, Haley. Either Maxwell comes up voluntarily, or the evidence I have goes directly to the FBI. Not just about the Pinnacle fraud. About everything. The screen went dark as Vince ended the call. He turned to Stone, who was watching him with a new wariness. "You manipulated all of us," Stone said. "Me, Grant, your wife. This whole thing, the SEC investigation, the transfer of assets, the psychiatric hold, it was all orchestrated." "Yes," Vince acknowledged. "From the moment I confirmed Haley's affair, everything that followed was by design." "Why involve me at all? You could have destroyed them without my help." Vince's expression hardened. "Because you deserve to be part of this, Russell. Kazakhstan wasn't just a mission that went wrong. It was a betrayal. You sold information that got 3 of our team killed. You left me to die in that compound while you escaped with the intelligence we'd gathered. Intelligence you later sold to the highest bidder. You can't prove any of that," Stone said, but his confidence was visibly shaken. "I couldn't then," Vince agreed. "But I can now. The same evidence that's going to destroy Haley and Maxwell also implicates you. Banking records, communication logs, testimony from assets who finally decided to talk." Stone lunged suddenly, his training taking over as he aimed a precise strike at Vince's throat. But Vince was ready, sidestepping with a fluid motion that spoke of years of practice maintained in secret. He countered with a sharp blow to Stone's solar plexus, following with a leg sweep that sent the older man crashing to the floor. "You're out of practice, Russell," Vince observed. Too many years selling your skills to the highest bidder instead of maintaining them. Stone struggled to his feet, reassessing his opponent. The unassuming husband he'd dismissed as soft was gone, replaced by the covert operative Stone had once commanded, but sharper, more refined. What happens now? Stone asked, his breathing labored. Now we wait for our guests, Vince replied, and then everyone pays their debts. In full. Chapter 8. No Escape. When Maxwell Grant entered the hotel room, his once commanding presence had diminished considerably. His expensive suit hung loosely on his frame, and the confident swagger had been replaced by the cautious movements of a man expecting disaster at every turn. "What the hell is this?" he demanded, seeing Haley's tear-streaked face and the laptop open on the desk showing Vince and Stone in the home office. "It's over, Max," Haley said hollowly. "Vince knows everything. He planned everything." Maxwell's eyes darted to the screen. "Bryant? What kind of sick game are you playing?" "No game, Maxwell," Vince replied, his voice coming through the speakers with perfect clarity. "Just the conclusion of a long process. One that you and Haley set in motion years ago. If this is about the affair, it's about far more than that," Vince interrupted. "It's about the systematic fraud you both committed at Pinnacle. It's about the harassment complaints you buried from 6 different women. It's about the insider trading that funded your lifestyle and your escape plan in the Maldives." Maxwell's face drained of color. "How could you possibly know about the Maldives?" "The same way I know about the numbered account in Singapore that holds the proceeds from your sale of proprietary Pinnacle technology to their competitors. The same way I know about the prescription drug addiction you've been hiding for the past 2 years. I know everything. Maxwell, that's what I do. That's who I am." In the home office, Stone watched the exchange with growing comprehension. "You're not just a private investigator. You're counterintelligence. You always were." Vince nodded slightly. "My firm specializes in corporate espionage cases. The skills I developed in the military translated perfectly. The divorce cases were just a cover in the early days, while I built my real client base." On the screen, Maxwell had moved from shock to desperate negotiation. "Listen, Bryant, whatever you think you have on me, on us, we can make a deal. I still have resources, connections." "Your resources are gone," Vince cut him off. "Your accounts are frozen. The Maldives property has been transferred to a trust controlled by the victims of your harassment. Your connections are scrambling to distance themselves as we speak." "Impossible," Maxwell whispered. "No one man could do all this." "Not alone, no," Vince agreed. "I had help. From Thomas, from Sophia at your office, from your victims who were eager to provide evidence once they knew they'd be protected." Haley, who had been silent during this exchange, finally spoke. "Why, Vince? Why go to such extremes? You could have just divorced me when you found out about the affair." "The affair was merely a symptom, Haley. The disease ran much deeper. Your portion, loser, remember? That moment at the party, it wasn't the beginning. It was the culmination of years of contempt, of betrayal, of you and Maxwell plotting behind my back." Vince leaned closer to the camera. "But you're right about one thing. This is extreme, and it's not over yet." He pressed a button on his desk, and new images appeared on the screen surrounding him. Documents, photographs, financial records, a comprehensive dossier of criminality that implicated not just Maxwell and Haley, but Russell Stone as well. In exactly 15 minutes, this information will be transmitted to the FBI, the SEC, and several international law enforcement agencies, Vince informed them. Maxwell will face charges of securities fraud, insider trading, industrial espionage, and criminal harassment. Haley will be charged as a co-conspirator in most of those crimes. In Stone, he glanced at the former commander, who is now sitting rigidly in a chair across from him, will finally answer for his actions in Kazakhstan, as well as the subsequent sales of classified intelligence to various hostile entities. "You're destroying yourself too," Stone pointed out. "Your involvement in Blackbriar will come out. My involvement as the operative who tried to prevent the betrayal, who was left for dead after attempting to stop unauthorized intelligence transfers. That involvement." Vince's smile was cold. "I've already provided my testimony to the appropriate authorities, with supporting evidence that I've been gathering for years." On the screen, Maxwell had collapsed onto the hotel bed, his face buried in his hands. Haley stood frozen, staring at the camera with a mixture of horror and something like dawning respect. "You never were a loser," she said quietly. "I just never saw who you really were." "No one did," Vince agreed. That was the point. Stone made one final, desperate attempt, lunging at Vince with a concealed knife he'd managed to extract from his boot. But Vince was ready, deflecting the attack with practiced ease and countering with a precise strike to Stone's throat that left the older man gasping on the floor. 15 years of planning, Russell, Vince said, looking down at his former commander. "Did you really think I wouldn't be prepared for every contingency?" As Stone struggled for breath, the door to the office opened, and Thomas Anderson entered, accompanied by two stern-faced individuals in dark suits. "FBI," Thomas explained unnecessarily. "They've been monitoring this entire conversation. Apparently, your confessions, all of you, make for compelling evidence." Vince nodded to the agents, then turned back to the screen where Haley and Maxwell watched in stunned silence. "Your door should be opening right about now." On cue, there was a sound of a key card in the hotel room door, followed by the entrance of more federal agents. "It's over," Vince said simply, and terminated the connection. Chapter 9. Ashes and Rebirth. 6 months later, Vince stood on the balcony of a sleek apartment overlooking Seattle's waterfront, watching as rain swept across the Puget Sound. The weather matched his mood, not somber exactly, but contemplative. The buzzer sounded, and he moved to admit his visitor. Thomas Anderson entered, shaking rain from his coat. "You're a hard man to find these days," Thomas remarked, accepting the coffee Vince offered him. "That's the idea," Vince replied. Vincent Bryant needed to disappear for a while. "And who are you now?" "Michael Lawson, security consultant. Very selective client list." Thomas nodded, understanding the need for the new identity. The aftermath of what the media had dubbed the Pinnacle Conspiracy had been messy and very public. "They're all going to prison, you know," Thomas said after a moment. "The sentences came down last week. Maxwell got 15 years. Haley got 8. Stone got 20+ for the treason charges." Vince absorbed this information with a slight nod. "And the others? Sophia?" "Alfred. Sophia has been promoted to head of compliance at Pinnacle's restructure board. Alfred's firm is representing several of Maxwell's harassment victims in their civil suits." Thomas studied his old friend carefully. "You could go back now if you wanted. Your name's been cleared. The FBI publicly acknowledged your role as a whistleblower." "I'm not interested in going back," Vince said, turning to look out at the rain again. "There's nothing for me there anymore. Except vindication. Everyone knows you weren't the loser they thought you were. Vindication was never the goal, Thomas. Justice was, and it's been served." Thomas sipped his coffee, then asked the question that had been bothering him for months. Was it worth it? All of it. The years of planning, maintaining the facade, playing the long game. Vince considered this. "They took something from me. Not just Haley, but all of them. My dignity, my sense of self. They made me question my worth, my capabilities." He turned to face Thomas directly. "So yes, it was worth it. Not for the revenge itself, but for the reclamation of who I really am." "And who is that exactly? The quiet husband? The ruthless operative? The architect of this whole elaborate scheme?" "All of them. None of them." Vince smiled faintly. "I'm still figuring that out." Thomas nodded, understanding. After a moment, he reached into his coat and withdrew a small package. "This came for you, through our secure channels." Vince accepted the package with a raised eyebrow. "From whom?" "Haley. From prison." Intrigued, despite himself, Vince opened the package carefully. Inside was a small slice of cake, preserved in plastic wrap, with a note. "Your portion. Not a loser after all." Vince stared at it for a long moment, then laughed, a genuine sound that surprised even him. "She finally gets it," he said, discarding both the cake and the note in the trash. "Too late to matter. Will you ever forgive her?" Thomas asked. "Any of them?" Vince's expression hardened. "No. Some betrayals can't be forgiven. Some wounds don't heal. They just become part of who you are." Later, after Thomas had gone, Vince returned to his balcony. The rain had stopped, and the setting sun was breaking through the clouds, casting a golden light across the water. In his hand, he held a chess piece, a king carved from dark wood. The final piece from a set that had once stood in his home office, the visual representation of the game he'd been playing for years. He had won, decisively and completely. His opponents had been outmaneuvered at every turn, never realizing they were pieces on his board until it was too late. Yet victory felt different than he had imagined during those dark nights of planning. Not hollow, exactly, but quieter, more solemn. Vince placed the chess piece on the balcony railing, watching as it gleamed in the fading light. Then, with a deliberate motion, he tipped it over, letting it fall to the waters far below. The game was over. The architect had completed his design. Now it was time to build something new from the ashes of what had been destroyed. Not forgiveness. Never that. But perhaps in time, peace. And there you have it. Another story comes to an end. What did you think? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoy this story, consider joining our community by subscribing. It means the world to us. For more stories like this one, check out the recommended videos on screen. And I'll see you there.